Music hold ended.
Good evening, and welcome to this statewide telephone town meeting with Senator Bernie Sanders. My name is Katie Van Haste, and I'm State Director for Senator Sanders here in Vermont. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We are so glad to have you with us today to talk about what's on your mind with Senator Sanders. I'd like to begin by inviting you who have a question that you want to ask Senator Sanders to please press *3 at any time during the call. You will be connected to a member of our team. They will take your name, your town, and your question. And after we hear from Senator Sanders, we will have the rest of the program to hear directly from you. We will try to get to as many of you as possible this evening that have questions. And in order to do that, we ask that you be as concise as you can when you ask your questions. So again, to participate in the question and answer period, please press *3 now to be connected to a member of our team to ask your question. Please know that our office is here to help, and if we don't get to your call this evening, you're welcome to call our office anytime and speak to a member of our staff. That phone number for our office is toll-free in Vermont at 800-339-9834. You can also call us at 802-862-0697. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce your Senator, Bernie Sanders. Welcome, Senator Sanders.
Well, thank you very much, Katie. And let me thank everybody who has joined us tonight. What I want to do are a few things. I want to talk a little bit about what's going on here in Washington, and it's a pretty crazy period, but I want to go over what we are trying to do. Then I want Katie to tell you about some of the resources that are available in Vermont. There are a lot of good programs out there. What always concerns me is I think people don't know about them. So it could be the best program in the world, but if you don't know about them, it doesn't do anybody any good. So Katie will go over some of the programs that are out there that you may want to access. So get a pencil and paper out to get the phone numbers. And lastly, of course, and we'll spend most of our time tonight answering your questions. Katie has informed me that we already have something like 365 questions. So I know there's a lot that's on your minds, and we can't get to all the questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can. And those that we can't answer tonight, as Katie said, please contact us, and we will do our best getting back to you. I don't have to tell anybody that we are living in a very difficult moment in history, and that's true both here in Vermont, nationally and globally. So if you are feeling anxious and nervous and a little bit overwhelmed about what's going on, well, welcome to the club. You are not alone. We are dealing right now, and I was just on the floor a few minutes ago, dealing with the horrific humanitarian disaster in Gaza. We're dealing with Putin's invasion of Ukraine and all that means. We're dealing with the existential threat of climate change, and we saw what that could mean to our small state this summer with the terrible flooding we experienced. We're looking at a nation increasingly moving into oligarchy with incredibly wide gaps between the very rich and everybody else. We're looking at attacks on the foundations of American democracy. So the politics now is not just a difference in opinion about education or healthcare. It's in many ways whether or not we retain our democratic society. We're looking at a very aggressive attack on women's rights and whether women will be able to control their own bodies. We're seeing, sadly, increased levels of bigotry in our country. We are all horrified by a few months ago the terrible shooting that we saw in Burlington of 3 young Palestinian gentlemen. We're dealing with a healthcare system which in many ways is broken. We are paying the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. Cost of college is too high, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there are a whole lot of issues that are out there. And we'll do our best to answer any of your questions on these or any other issues. Let me just touch on some of them very, very briefly. Gaza, I know that's on many people's minds. In my view, we are looking at an almost unprecedented humanitarian disaster there. Hundreds of thousands of people right now are facing starvation, and I'm doing everything that I can to turn that around. Bottom line is, last week we had, for the first time, I pushed a vote on the floor of the Senate to hold Israel accountable. We all know how the war started. That was an attack by the terrorist group Hamas against Israel, killing hundreds and many hundreds of innocent Israelis. Israel has the right to defend itself, but in my view, does not have the right to go to war against all of the people of Palestine, and that is what is happening. Back home, we had a hearing just last week on an issue that I think is something that has not been talked about enough. We have all gone through COVID. I finally got COVID after 4 years last week, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, whatever. We had a hearing on long COVID, which means there are millions of people in this country who are dealing with the impacts of COVID on their bodies. And we heard from some patients who are dealing with fatigue, who are dealing with a whole variety of symptoms. And that's something we want to take a hard look at and see what we can do about. We are dealing with the high cost of prescription drugs. I am chairman of the committee that has jurisdiction over healthcare, and one of the healthcare crises that we face is that we pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs at the same time as the drug companies make billions and billions of dollars in profits. And we have sent out a letter to the CEOs of the major drug companies telling them that they have got to come before our committee and explain to the American people why in some cases we pay 10 times more for the same exact drug sold in Canada or Mexico or Europe. So I look forward to hearing from the CEOs. If they don't come, we are going to subpoena them. We are also working on issues such as housing. There's no place that you go in the state of Vermont where a community is not struggling with housing. And that means, employers who want to hire workers can't even get those workers because the cost of housing is so high. So we've got to figure out how we build affordable housing. We have to deal with the mental health crisis that exists in Vermont, very serious problem. And we have to deal with an economy which not only in Vermont but all over this country leaves some 60% of our people living paycheck to paycheck. So those are some of the issues that are out there. I wanted to mention to you that there is some good news, I think, taking place both in Vermont and throughout the country. And that is in terms of prescription drugs. We passed legislation last year so that seniors with diabetes will pay no more than $35 a month for insulin. And in fact, we put a lot of pressure on the drug companies to lower the cost of insulin, which in fact is taking place. So we're making some progress in terms of diabetes. In terms of senior citizen costs right now, no senior, as a result of legislation, will have to pay more than $3,600 out of their own pockets for prescription drugs this year. And by 2025, that number is going to go down to $2,000 a year. That's a big deal. That means if you are a senior right now with a chronic illness and you're spending $5,000, $6,000, $10,000 a year for prescription drugs, that's going to end. You won't pay any more than $2,000 a year, and that's a big deal. We are making some progress in addressing the crisis of climate change. We have made the largest investment in history in transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. I've got a provision in a large bill that would bring about $8 billion into households all across this country to install solar panels on their homes. And I want everybody to know that with solar panels, so this is not just an environmental issue. Solar panels will save you money on your electric bill. And the money that we brought in, it's going to come in, I think, large numbers in Vermont, will enable you to get help with a down payment so that you're not going to end up spending any more per month on your electric bill than you're currently spending. And after a period of years, with 7, 8 years, you're going to own your panels. and your electric bills are going to go down by 80 or 90%. So it's a big deal. We will get the word out about when that money is released and how people could apply for it. We are making progress on infrastructure. Anyone who drives Vermont's roads sees our bridges. You know that we have problems. We brought, and I'm on the committee that does that. We're able to bring over $2 billion into Vermont to rebuild our roads, bridges, water systems, wastewater plants, and public transportation. We're also making some progress in getting money out to communities. One of the areas that I've long been concerned about is the high cost of dental care in Vermont and this nation. We got some earmarks into communities so that kids will be able to get dental care in their schools, which is a big deal. We are also getting money to the Vermont Fire Academy. I worry very much about the stresses that many volunteer fire departments in Vermont are undergoing, hard to attract people, buy equipment they need. So we're trying to do something there as well. So that's an overview of some of what we're trying to do. Katie, if you could, why don't you tell people, and please get out your pencils and paper, tell people about the resources that are now available in Vermont on some issues of need.
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator. So the easy numbers to remember are the numbers for our office, which again is toll-free at 800-339-9834 or 802-862-0697. The work that our office does in addition to supporting all of the senators' work in Washington, the work we do here in Vermont is really to support Vermonters. And so that means going out into communities, visiting senior centers, hearing what's on your mind. It also means helping Vermonters with problems they are having with the federal government. So if you are having an issue with the VA, with your Medicare enrollment, with any federal program, the IRS, you can give us a call and we will do our best to help you. We have a fantastic team of people. That's their job every single day, is to help Vermonters cut through the red tape of federal bureaucracy. We also do a ton of referrals. So if the problem that you're having can't be a federal fix, we can help point you to the right direction. So if you don't write down any other phone number tonight, if you write down ours, we can help point you in the right direction. Another really helpful phone number is 211. 211 in Vermont will get you to really helpful folks who can help answer a lot of questions, anything from housing, flood damage, seasonal programs like home heating. They are a tremendous resource that we have here in Vermont for non-emergency assistance. So that's 211 on your phone. You'll get connected to a person who can help you with a number of programs that can help you across Vermont. I would say that here in Vermont, we're really lucky that we have a number of really great programs through the federal government and through the state of Vermont that can help Vermonters with everything from food assistance, home heating, veterans benefits, a ton of fantastic work for seniors. We have the Seniors Helpline, which is a great way for Vermonters who are seniors to get help. They can also help with Medicare. We've got a bunch of healthcare questions that are in the queue so far, and we know that enrolling in Medicare can be complicated. And so that is a resource that is very, very helpful. The Seniors Helpline can be reached at 800-642-5119. That's 800-642-5119. In addition to 211 and the Seniors Helpline, you can also get a lot of assistance from Vermont Legal Aid. Vermont Legal Aid helps Vermonters with legal issues that our office is not able to help with. You can reach Vermont Legal Aid at 800-889-2047. Again, that's 800-889-2047 to get help from Vermont Legal Aid. And in talking to our staff assistants who answer the phones here in our Vermont office, prior to the call, they said one of the phone numbers that they give out the most is for the state's consumer assistance program. We know that a lot of Vermonters struggle with everything from plane tickets to issues with businesses, large and small, and so the consumer assistance program is there to help you with those challenges. And the consumer assistance program can be reached at 800-649-2424. Again, that's 800-649-2424. And then the last number I'll share before I turn it back to Senator Sanders is the Office of the Healthcare Advocate. So while the Seniors Helpline does a great job at assisting older Vermonters with Medicare and Medicaid, the Office of the Healthcare Advocate can also help Vermonters of any age with assistance navigating our pretty complicated healthcare system. And you can reach the Healthcare Advocate at 800-917-7787. Again, that's 800-917-7787. So, Senator Sanders, with that, I'm going to turn it back to you. I also have a number of other phone numbers here that we can share if callers have particular questions, and we can help point them in the right direction along the way this evening.
Okay, Katie, thank you very much. And I also just want to reiterate, we have a great team of caseworkers in Burlington. We have an 800 number. Give us a ring. That's what we do. We help you with veterans issues, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, housing, whatever it may be. So don't hesitate to give us a ring if you're running into a problem. All right, Katie, let's start with the questions.
Great. Okay, we have a number of questions in the queue. Again, if you do have a question for Senator Sanders, you can press *3 to be connected to a member of our team. They'll take your name, your town, and your question. So, Senator Sanders, we're going to take our first caller here, who is Carl from St. Johnsbury. So, folks, if I listen for your name, if you've already had your question taken by one of our staff members, that's going to let you know that we're going to about to take you live. So our first call is going to come from Carl in St. Johnsbury, who has a question for you, Senator, about how we can help to unite our very divided nation. So right now, Carl from St. Johnsbury, you're on the call live with Senator Sanders.
All right. Thanks so much. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
All right. Thanks. Thank you, Senator, and thank you so much for all the work that you do. So I was just wondering if you might just talk for a bit about any ideas that you have about how to unite this divided country, because I think that all of the other possible solutions are kind of moot given the fact that two sides seem to be pretty deeply entrenched.
Carl, thank you very much for that question. It's a very important question. You're absolutely right. I don't think there has been the kind of political divisiveness in this country, certainly in my lifetime. And it's painful, and it's destructive, and it ain't good. I don't want to be too political here, but I do think Donald Trump has played a role in this. I think historically people have disagreed. People have always, yelled and screamed at each other. Nothing new about that. But I think Trump has gone a little bit deeper in fomenting kind of hatred and divisiveness. But that's the bad news. But let me tell you what I think the good news is, Carl. My experience, and as you know, not only get around Vermont a lot, I get around the country, is the truth of the matter is that most Americans, whether you're, liberal or conservative, Democrat, Republican, Independent, actually agree on the major issues facing America. So you go up to somebody, maybe very conservative, I am not a conservative, but you go up to somebody who's a conservative and you say, hey, do you think it's okay that billionaires who are getting much richer, in some cases pay nothing in federal income tax, or that large corporations pay less in income tax than an average person does? Do you think that's okay? Very few people think that is okay. Do you think it's okay that we are spending twice as much on health care as the people of any other nation, and yet so many of our people can't afford health care? Does that make sense to you? No, that doesn't make sense. Does it make sense that in some cases we pay 10 times more for prescription drugs? For the same drug that people in Canada or other countries? No, that doesn't make sense. So I think, Carl, to answer your question, what we have got to do is, as a people, focus on the issues that are important to us and not let the sideshows get to us. There are people out there who stay up day and night very deliberately trying to divide us up on the color of our skin or our sexual orientation or where we were born. And we got to say, that's not what America is supposed to be about. Everybody wants decent health care. Everybody wants our kids to have a decent education. Everybody wants to be able to breathe clean air. So I would say the major thing we've got to do is stand up to those who are trying to divide us on all kinds of, I don't know what the word is, not significant issues, and bring us together on the real issues that we all need to address.
Thank you,
Katie?
Senator, and thank you, Carl, for your question. Yep. So, Senator, your next question is going to come from David in Montpelier. David has a question about Medicare Advantage. So, David in Montpelier, you are now live on the call with Senator Sanders.
Thank you very much for taking my call, Senator, and to your staff for all the excellent work that you're doing on our behalf. Given the magnitude of the issues around, this may seem like a minor concern, but I'm very concerned about the proliferation of Medicare Advantage programs, which seem to be very often deceptively marketed and managed really for profit as opposed to improved health status. And I'd really appreciate your thinking about how they fit into our healthcare system. Thank you.
David, that is not an insignificant question. That is a very, very important question, and I thank you very much for asking it. Look, my views are different than most of my colleagues here in the Senate, but I think Vermonters know where I'm coming from. David, in my view, healthcare is a human right. It should be available to every man, woman, and child in our country. This is not a radical idea. 80 miles north of Montpelier, where you live, going to Canada. And you know what? You walk in any doctor you want. You don't take out your credit card. You don't take out your wallet. You go to a hospital for a month. You leave it. You got no bill at all. And yet they spend half as much per capita on health care as we do. We spend over $13,000 per person on health care. Totally insane amount of money. So, in my view, picking up on your question, the function of the current healthcare system is not to provide quality care to all. It is to make huge profits for the insurance companies, the drug companies, and many hospitals as well. What's the solution? What the insurance companies are trying to do, as you have indicated, is to kind of lie about what they're doing. They say, oh, it's, Medicare, we're expanding Medicare. What they are doing is providing programs that will make them a whole lot of money. My own view is the way you take on what's going on is you expand Medicare, right now, traditional Medicare, to include dental care, to include vision, to include hearing aids. Those are basic needs of ordinary Americans. We need to move to a Medicare for all system with these expanded programs. And that's the way you address this effort to privatize Medicare.
Thank you, Senator Sanders, and thank you, David, for your question. Senator Sanders, we're going to stay on health care for maybe a couple more minutes. We had a number of people write in ahead of the town hall this evening with a number of questions about health care, including some Jenny from Manchester, who says it's really hard to find a doctor's appointment in Vermont right now. And Sue from Chester, who asks, how are we planning to support Vermont in attracting and keeping healthcare professionals and home health care providers in Vermont?
Well, Jenny and Sue, you're asking a question that I have spent an enormous amount of time on as chairman of the Health Education and Labor Committee. When we talk about a dysfunctional healthcare system, which in my view is what we have, it's not just that it is outrageously expensive. It's not just that people have got to fight with insurance companies to get ripped off every single day. It's not just Medicare Advantage trying to fool people about what they're doing. It is that despite all of the money that we spend, if you can believe it, we don't have enough doctors, we don't have enough nurses, we don't have enough mental health counselors, we don't have enough pharmacists. We don't have enough dentists. And you ask us, how does it happen that in the richest country in the world, where we spend more per capita on healthcare than anybody else, we don't have enough medical practitioners? So a lot of answers for that. I have worked on a major piece of legislation, which would significantly increase the number of medical professionals in this country. We have made some progress. We got no support, very little support from Republicans. We have to scale it down significantly. But I hope we will pass legislation that will increase the number of nurses. And whether you talk about nurses, let me tell you something, how crazy the situation is. You go up to UVM Medical Center, which is obviously the largest hospital in Vermont. I think it was last year, they spent over $100 million on traveling nurses. They had to bring in nurses from around the country, pay them very, very high salaries because we don't have enough nurses enough young people graduating nursing school in Vermont. That's an issue we are working hard on. But bottom line is you're touching on an issue which is widespread, not only in Vermont, but all across this country. We need more doctors, and we're trying to do that in a variety of ways through the graduate medical education program, by expanding the teaching health corps, the National Health Service Corps, by putting money into what's called the teaching health centers. So we are working on that issue, but you're absolutely right. It is one of the pathetic manifestations of a broken healthcare system.
Thanks, Senator, and thank you to Jenny and Sue for writing in with those questions. We're going to stay, Senator, on healthcare for just one more question. We're going to take a call from Stephanie in Essex. Stephanie has a question for you about long COVID in particular. Stephanie from Essex, you're now live on the call with Senator Sanders.
Hi, Senator Sanders. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me. I watched your Senate Committee on Long COVID and was very impressed. I myself have long COVID. I contracted it in October of 2022. Unfortunately, I was just recently diagnosed with long COVID. Just like the woman on your panel, people went down the mental health route. And so, fortunately, I am benefiting from a federal program called VT Retain, which is, I guess, Department of Labor and Social Security Administration. So I do have some additional help now, but that took well over a year for anyone to be able to explain to me why my body was doing what it's doing. And so I guess, it's not just the healthcare costs. We're going into debt right now because I can't work, and there was really no one, executive. I apologize if I'm not clear, but my executive functioning is definitely affected my long COVID, and so I can only do so much in any given day, and there never seems to be enough time. I feel like I'm working full time on just trying to be healthy. So any light you can shed on what we can do. Thank you for your time.
Well, Stephanie, thank you very much for the call, and I appreciate you watching the hearing that we held. And that hearing got a whole lot of response. Actually, hundreds of thousands of people watching it on our live stream because people are suffering. There's I think it's an estimate out there about some 16 million people who are dealing with long COVID. It's an enormous number of people, and they are hurting and hurting very badly. As Stephanie mentioned, we had a woman, if you looked at her, she's an ordinary, very nice person. She's worked her whole life. She wants to work. And now she struggles literally, to get out of bed in the morning. Her whole life has been disrupted. And like Stephanie, she's unable to earn a living, which is causing a financial burden on the family. She has a supportive husband and so forth, but very, very difficult. Millions of people are in that shape. And one of the crises they're dealing with is people did not believe them because this is a new disease caused by a new pandemic. So Stephanie, to answer your question, literally I'll be on the phone with the head of the NIH in a week or two to make sure that they're using the $1.2 billion they received most effectively. There's some concern we're not doing enough clinical trials, what drugs might work, what drugs might not work. At this point, we just don't know that yet. We also don't know what the cause of long COVID is, although there is a lot of work being done, but there needs to be more. So I will be introducing legislation substantially increasing federal funding to the NIH to get that money out to universities, clinics all over this country to better understand the causes of long COVID. We're not going to be able to treat it effectively unless we understand the disease, and also to get as many treatment protocols as we can. But look, hang in there, Stephanie, and just want you to know some of us are working as hard as we can to understand this disease and get treatments and get the financial support that families who are struggling need. So thanks very much for calling, Stephanie.
Thanks, Senator Sanders, and thank you, Stephanie, for that question and sharing your story with us. Senator, we have a number of questions here about housing. I know you mentioned that in your opening, so we're going to take some of those now. Our first question about housing is coming from Hillary in Heartland. So Hillary in Heartland, you are now live on the call with Senator Sanders.
Good evening, Senator Sanders. I just also wanted to note I really appreciate your stance on Gaza. I am horrified by what's happening there. But my question about housing, I have a daughter who's 25, starting out in her career. She's currently paying more than half of her salary. More than half of her salary for a month's rent. And I just don't see how this is sustainable for young people. So I'm wondering what programs or what ideas you have seen or that the government might promote to help young people. This is a countrywide problem. It's not just Vermont, obviously.
Hillary, you're absolutely right. It is a Vermont problem. It is a national problem. The worst manifestation of it is that we have, if you can believe it, some 600,000 Americans right now who are homeless, flooding into shelters, sleeping out on the streets. We see that in Vermont. It's true all over the country. So let me become political here and tell you that several years ago, as chairman of the Budget Committee, I worked very hard on legislation called Build Back Better. It's a kind of a dumb name of a bill, but what it attempted to do is address some of the structural crises facing our country, whether it is childcare, whether it was education, whether it was housing. And we proposed to put tens and tens and tens of billions of dollars into low-income and affordable housing. Unfortunately, we had no Republican support, and there were two corporate Democrats who did not vote with us, and we lost by 2 votes. But this is an issue that I think every member of the House and Senate understands is real. I'm thinking back, Hillary, you're telling us all that your daughter spends 50% of her income on housing. Way back when I was a kid, what the experts said is you should not spend more than 25% of your income for housing. That may be high. But imagine 50% is completely off the charts. And then if you have kids and you have child care expenses and the cost of food being what it is, not much left over to put gas in the car. So, Hillary, thank you for the question. It is a major issue. It is way up there. It's one of the great crises facing this country, and I will work with fellow-minded members of Congress and our entire delegation. Senator Welch, Congresswoman Ballant, I know, are on the same page as I am. We're going to do our best to address it.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Hillary, for that question. Senator, we're going to take another housing question now. This one is from Marguerite. Marguerite is a landlord, and she's saying that she tries to keep her housing affordable, but it's really challenging for her. Marguerite, you are now live on the call with Senator Sanders.
Hi, Bernie Sanders. This is Marguerite from Rutland. After hearing Governor Scott's address about how he's trying to ensure affordable housing, I've been trying so hard for my tenants to never raise rent. But in the meantime, I'm collecting Medicaid and food stamps and fuel assistance just to get by. I live in the building. I have 3 other apartments. I have not been able to raise rent because of efficiency. Vermont now is tacking on more money if you use more electricity. Also, my tenants' electric bills are going up. I can't afford to even pay for a contractor or anybody to work in the building because they're too expensive. I'm only bringing in $21,000 a year for 3 apartments, and my tenants only make minimum wage. They do not make enough to, they don't make less enough to apply for any assistance, so they're right over the line. So they can barely afford to even pay me rent, and I can barely afford to keep the roof over them. What should I do?
Well, the question is what I should do and what the Congress should do. You're doing, it sounds to me, Marguerite, and I really want to thank you. There are some landlords in Vermont and throughout this country. In fact, a lot of housing is being taken over by Wall Street, private investment firms. And you know what they want to do? They want to raise rents as high as they possibly can. And if working people can't afford to live there, that's fine. They'll get rid of them, bring in more upper-income people. That's going on all over this country. The fact that you, as a landlord, have the compassion and the decency to be concerned about your tenants is a wonderful thing, and I really want to thank you for that. Look, you need help. You're in trouble. Your tenants are in trouble. You got high property taxes, I expect, as well, heating bills and all that. Again, give my office a ring, and we, if there's any available help right now, we will do everything we can to get it to you. It's 1-800-339-9834. But in the meantime, your case is exactly why we need far more federal funding to housing, to help good landlords like you, to help your tenants to build the affordable housing we need so that we can keep rents lower. Well, thank you very much, Marguerite.
Thank you, Senator Sanders, and thank you, Marguerite, for that question. Senator Sanders, we're going to just take one other question. We're actually going to move on right now from a few housing questions and take a question that I know you know a lot about. Ernie from Woodstock has a question about the post office. Ernie from Woodstock are now live on the call with Senator Sanders.
Hello, Senator Sanders. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Ernie.
So good to talk to you. Many of us love you and all the work that you've done, so thank you. My question is, or my comments and my question are, I've lived in Vermont for about 4 years. Beginning a little less than 2 years ago, we began to have serious mail delivery issues. Missing bills, including tax bills from the state of Vermont, is a real hazard that does not help Vermonters with the financial difficulties that you've been talking about. All of my neighbors have had similar issues, and we have essentially no recourse because our postmasters are assigned and not accountable to local residents. I live in Woodstock, but Montpelier is having its own version of these issues, as are Vermonters in many other municipalities. So my question is, what is your office doing to ensure Vermonters receive better postal service? Thank you.
Well, Ernie, thank you very much for raising that issue. And I am more than aware of what's going on in Montpelier and what's going on in many parts of the state. And, if you were to raise an issue that gets me really, really upset, it has to do with the post office. You got leadership at the Postal Service, a gentleman named Mr. DeJoy, who was originally appointed by Donald Trump, who really, I think, is doing everything he can to privatize the Postal Service and to cut back on the quality service that people in Vermont and around the country need. The immediate problems are they don't have enough staff, they don't have enough letter carriers, and they're not doing as good a job as they should be trying to attract those people. They are, as you indicated, a very unresponsive group of people. And I am thinking, it's not within my jurisdiction technically as chairman of the Health Committee, but I think we have a way maybe to bring Mr. DeJoy in to ask him why he has been so unresponsive to people all over this country. And by the way, he wants to make it even worse. He wants significant cutbacks in postal capabilities. So you've touched on a sore issue. You're right. You got a lot of postal workers out there doing a great job. People are going out morning, noon, and night, all kinds of weather, and I thank them very much. These guys are overworked. They're working sometimes crazy hours. But it is a serious problem, and we've got to hold the leadership. It's not your local people. We've got to hold the leadership at the very, very top accountable. That is not going on right now. It's a bureaucracy. It's just they have a wall around them, and we can't break through. But it is an issue we are working on.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Ernie, for that question. Senator, we have a few questions here on climate and the climate crisis. And I'm going to start with one from the phone, and then we've had a few sent in as well. So I'm going to take one of those afterwards. So our first question is Sarah from Burlington, who has a question about what we can say to young people who have concerns about the climate crisis. Sarah from Burlington, you are live on the call with Senator Sanders.
Thank you, and thank you for everything you do and have done, Bernie. I speak to so many young people who have so much hope instilled in them by you. So myself and many other young people have immense climate anxiety. We are organizing and trying to take on fossil fuel corporations, but they're becoming more and more powerful than ever before, as you know. And the scale of this just feels larger than anything we can wrap our heads around. So I ask, how do we deal with climate anxiety, and what is, in your opinion, the average person's most likely way to make a real and tangible impact?
Sarah, thank you very much, and you're absolutely right. I've talked to a whole lot of young people, and it's always on their minds. They're thinking to themselves, what kind of world are my kids going to be living in, my grandchildren do? In fact, I mean, let's be honest. There are young men and women out there who are hesitant about having kids because they're worried about what the planet is going to look like. And let's, again, be clear. The cause of this, don't get me going because we can go on for 2 hours here, as I'm sure you know, Sarah, the fossil fuel industry knew way, way back in the 1960s. This is not like a new thing. They knew that they were told that the product they were producing, which produced carbon emissions, was going to endanger the entire planet. And what they proceeded to do in many respects is lie about what was happening, to deny what was happening, to set up organizations, to fund organizations, to obfuscate the issue. For many years, I remember, it wasn't so many years ago, I had the head, I think it was of CBS in here, in the office. And another senator and I were saying, stop this nonsense of giving two sides to the climate change issue. Well, we don't know if climate change is real or not real. We're not sure. And they finally did stop. So now at least we understand that climate change is real. It is a real danger. It is hard to avoid. Look, we are taking on, Sarah, like everything else, incredible greed. And it really does amaze me. These people in the fossil fuel industry, the oil companies, the coal companies, gas companies, they have kids, they have grandchildren. But for some reason, which is hard for me to fathom, they are willing to sacrifice the future of their own kids and grandchildren in order to make billions of dollars in profit. And we got to stand up to them. This is a political issue, no different than the healthcare crisis. We can provide quality care to all people spending less money, but we're dealing with a whole lot of greed at the top. So organize, educate. We're having progress. We passed, you should know this, the most significant piece of climate legislation ever passed. Hundreds, I don't know what the exact number is, but tens and tens of billions of dollars going to transform the energy system. And in Vermont, there's going to be money coming in so that your house can move to solar and in a way that is affordable for you. We're moving to the production of electric vehicles in a way that we've never done before, hybrid cars. So we're making some progress. But to complicate this issue, even if America did all of the right things tomorrow by some miracle, you got to worry about the rest of the world out there. So it's important that we work with China. China is doing some good things in sustainable energy. They're producing a lot of sustainable energy, a lot of electric cars. They're doing some bad things, producing more coal-burning plants. So this is a global problem. We've got to work with China. We've got to work with India. and it is an absolute imperative. When we use the word existential threat, that's a real term. The future of the planet is at stake. So let's work together doing everything we can to take on the greed of the fossil fuel industry.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Sarah, for that question. Senator, we're going to take one more question on climate. This one is going to come from one of our registration questions that came in prior to tonight's event. This question comes from Diane in Windsor, who says she had heard about something called the Civilian Climate Corps. And she says she's asking if that is a program that is still in the works. And she says the reason she's asking is because a lot of lower income Vermonters still need more help accessing clean energy.
Absolutely. The answer is yes. That's some of us worked on what we call a green jobs program. And, what ended up happening is, we couldn't get that through, but it was scaled down. And one of the provisions that is now in play, taking place, is the Civilian Climate Corps. And what that will do is provide a lot of jobs for working class, lower income kids to help us transform our energy system. And money will be coming into Vermont and all over this country to hire those young people. So it's a good program. I like it. And for more information, Diane, give our office a ring, and we'll tell you about it.
Great. Thanks, Senator. And Diane, I hope you're listening tonight, and you can call us at 800-339-9834. Senator, we've gotten some questions about the conflict in Israel and Gaza, so I'm going to move to that right now, and I'm going to start with one of our registration questions, which comes from Kate in Brattleboro, who says, thank you for attempting the 502B resolution. At this point, what is the next step for attempting to protect Gazans and move forward towards ending the occupation?
Well, Kate, thanks for asking that very, very important question. Just 2 hours ago, I was on the floor of the Senate speaking about that very issue. What's going on, let me reiterate what I've been saying for months. Hamas committed an atrocious terrorist act against Israel. Israel had the right to respond, but Israel's response is disproportionate. And what's going on in Gaza right now is a almost unprecedented humanitarian disaster. So what I did last week through a provision of the Foreign Assistance Act is got a vote for the first time. For the first time, we try to hold Israel military activity accountable. We got a vote. We only got 12 votes for that. We are, needless to say, continuing our effort. Senator Welch and I are working together on this. We are going to do everything we can to make it clear to Netanyahu and his right-wing government that they are not going to get another nickel of American money if they continue this terrible war in Gaza, which has already cost 25,000 lives and 60,000 injured, and 2/3 of the dead are women and children. So what I want you to know, Kate, is we are working really, really hard on this. We have momentum. I mean, as usual, the Congress is way out of touch with where the American people are. The American people are want much more aggressive action than Congress is currently contemplating. But we are making progress. I think we're going to continue to go forward. I think more and more senators understand the severity of the crisis, and we're going to do everything we can to stop the horrible situation. I mean, we're looking at children starving to death, and we cannot allow that to happen. We cannot be complicit in that.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Kate, for sending in that question. Senator, we're going to take another question on this topic from Eve, who lives in Chelsea, and Eve has a question about what average citizens can do to help stop what's happening right now. Eve, you from Chelsea, you are live on the call with Senator Sanders.
Hello, Senator Sanders, and thank you so much for everything you do. And I think my question just folds into the previous question. If you could just comment on this. I'm a psychotherapist, and what I see in my community around me is people are exhausted, and I almost think of like a collective secondary trauma, a sense of helplessness, people needing to go to work full time, coming home, seeing the news, and saying, I feel helpless. This is not acceptable. What can I do?
Well, thank you, Eve, for your comments on that. By the way, I am sitting next to a young lady who is my communications director, who also comes from Chelsea. That's Freeland Ellis. I don't know if you know. You said it better than I can. And, you know, when I go to the floor, that's the point that I make. How can we turn a blind eye? How can you ignore children starving to death? There's outbreaks of diarrhea and dehydration, which are going to kill kids. People are mobbing when a UN or an emergency aid, humanitarian aid truck gets through. They're being mobbed. People just, you know, desperate for food, water. Look, it is very debilitating. And all I can tell you is, and in Vermont, I can tell you that your Congresswoman Ballin and Senator Welch are doing a lot of work on this issue. They're in the right place on it. And we will continue to go forward. I got to tell you that there are, and I don't mean to be overly partisan here, but I've been on the floor with Republican senators who don't even want to give a nickel into Gaza for humanitarian aid. I just don't understand that people can claim to be religious or have any moral virtues and ignore the suffering of these children. So we are doing everything that we can to get the word out to your friends and family around the country to put pressure on their members in the House and the Senate. We cannot allow this crisis, humanitarian disaster, to continue.
Thank you, Senator Sanders, and thank you, Eve, for your question. Senator, we've got a couple other questions on this topic. I'm going to sort of try to pull a couple of them together so we can cover just a couple things that we haven't touched on as much yet. So Susan from Putney is asking about humanitarian aid, and Suzanne from Heartland is asking about what we can do to prevent U.S. money from going to continue the destruction that's happening right now.
All right. On the latter question, that is my view, but I got to tell you, there ain't many members of the Senate who are with me on that. We give $3.5 billion a year to Israel. And by the way, I spent time in Israel as a young man. I think Israel has a lot to be proud of in many of the things they've accomplished over the years. But what's going on now is unacceptable. They have an extreme right-wing government with some out-and-out overt racists, anti-Palestinian racists, making important decisions. And I don't know how we can continue to give them $3.5 billion a year or more in the supplemental bill, which is moving. We're not moving, but there's a proposal to give them $14 billion more. I won't support. Of the $14 billion, $4 billion is for what they call the Iron Dome program to protect Israelis from missiles coming in, and I think that's supportable. People in Israel need to not be bombed as well. But $10 billion more for Netanyahu to continue this horrific war, not with my vote.
Thank you, Senator. We're going to move on from this topic, but we're going to talk a little bit. We have a few questions from veterans, and we're going to move to those questions now. So our first question is going to come from Felicia in Williston, who has some questions about concerns about VA budget cuts and particularly how those might affect female veterans. So Felicia, you are now live on the call with Senator Sanders.
Hello, Senator Sanders. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. You may or may not know that there's been quite a few cuts with Department of Veterans Affairs. My primary concern is me as a female veteran and the amount of female veterans right now within the state of Vermont and all across this country that are homeless. And there's not a lot of funding being directed in that direction. The other problem with that is that the requirements to get assistance through SSVF and programs of that magnitude, you have to be within the monetary guidelines in which to do that. If you make too much money, you're disqualified. So they don't care about what you pay in debt. They only care about what you're getting from the Department of Veteran Affairs for income. So that disqualifies you for being eligible for a lot of housing. Is that an issue that you're aware of and willing to address?
I am. As it turns out, I am a member of the Veterans Committee and proud of that. You are right that many veterans are struggling, as the general public is, with finding affordable housing. The number of veterans who are homeless is much, much too high. So it is an issue that's on the agenda that we are working on. I will tell you, however, that there is some good news with the VA. Actually, I think I'm going to be at the hospital in White River Junction, VA Hospital, on Friday to announce some significant grants to improve the facility there. We are working right now in Burlington. There is what's called a community-based outreach clinic, a CBOC, which provides primary care to veterans, and it's so popular, it's so well utilized that it really is outgrowing its space. And we are in the process right now of starting the process to build a new facility, which will be more advanced, deal with more specialized care. Should be a real step forward for veterans in the northern part of the state. And we're going to fight to make sure that our CBOCs around the state, we expanded them to Newport, to Brattleboro a few years ago, and they're doing a great job as well. So thank you for your question. We are going to do everything we can to protect veterans. We passed, as you may know, the PACT Act last year, which is a huge step forward in making sure that veterans get the disability benefits that they are entitled to and the health care when they have been exposed to toxins in the Gulf or any place else. So it's, we got real problems, but we're making some progress. And it's my view that when people put their lives on the line to serve our country, they deserve the best care possible, and among other things, affordable housing.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Felicia, for your question. Senator, we're going to take one more question on veterans issues. We have Tom from Newport, and Tom from Newport has a specific question about access to dental care for veterans. Tom, you are on live with Senator Sanders.
Yes. I was wondering about dental care for veterans, because I was saying me and my wife are on Social Security, and to get an average tooth pulled out or whatever is $1,000, and we're on a fixed income, so we can't get any dental care. So I was wondering what you could do about that.
Well, I'll tell you what I could do about it, what I'm trying to do about it, and I've been leading, the Congress trying to do something. Look, Tom, in my view, I think the VA healthcare system, it has its problems, and you got a good clinic up there in Newport, but it has its problems. But by and large, it does a good job. I was just on the plane the other day sitting next to a veteran who was very pleased with the care he was getting at White River. One of the deficiencies in the VA healthcare system is the lack of dental care. Dental care is health care. So you're talking to the senator who is doing everything he can. We're trying. You're absolutely right. Dental care should be part of VA health care, and we are trying to make that happen. So you're right, and we're working on it.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Tom, for that question. And I should say, Senator, we've also got some questions coming in on Facebook, and Sam from Facebook also said dental care should be part of health care, and Sam does not understand why they're treated differently. So certainly we've got folks via our Facebook page and our callers here who certainly understand that that is the case. Senator, we're going to take a couple of questions now on the election coming up this year. We have Dave from Morrisville who has some concerns about the upcoming election. Dave from Morrisville, you are now live on the call with Senator Sanders.
Hello, Mr. Sanders. I appreciate all the work that you've done for everybody here in Vermont, but I'm really concerned about this election coming up, and what the possibilities of this country could happen if Mr. Trump becomes president again. I read a excellent article in the Smithsonian magazine dated back in November 8th of this past fall, stating how Adolf Hitler, his steps that he went and how he rose into power. And after reading that article and looking at all the steps that Mr. Trump is doing, I think it's a blueprint for what he's trying to do right now. And I'm scared for this country. Thank you.
Well, Dave, thanks very much. I don't want to become, tonight I'm a United States Senator. I don't want to be terribly partisan. I want to deal with the issues that are facing Vermonters. But, you know, I share your concerns. And the difference between Trump and other candidates, there are a lot of conservative members of Congress. I know many of them. You know, we disagree on everything under the sun. We disagree on veterans, health care. We disagree on education and climate. But we do that within a certain context of a rules-based society. There are certain rules. And, you know, what Trump has done, I think of all of the dangerous things that he has done, the most dangerous is he is destroying the faith of the American people in democracy. Look, I have run for office in Vermont many times. And you know what? I've lost sometimes. I've won most. But when I lost, then other candidates lose. You don't hear them going around saying, oh, the thing was a fraud. I really won. You know, they lied. They cheated. I really won. That's not. We have town clerks who do a serious job. We respect them. We respect the process. Sometimes you win. Sometimes you lose. And when Trump goes around, Trump lost. He won in 2016. He lost in 2020. That's the fact. And when you go around saying it's not true, what you're really doing is undermining people's faith in democracy. And that is the worst thing that you can do. So, Dave, I share your concerns, and trust me that in the next number of months I will be, I suspect, running around the country doing what I can to prevent him from getting elected.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Dave, for that question. Senator, I think we're just going to take a couple more questions here. Something we haven't talked yet about this evening is student debt. Barbara from Brattleboro has a question for you about student loans. Barbara from Brattleboro, you are now live on the call with Senator Sanders.
Hi, Bernie. How you doing?
Good.
Good. It's been many years since the 80s, but you're still doing it, and I appreciate it. And so my question is, how are we going to lower student debt, and how can we do it? I realize things are stalled a little bit, but are there any other ways of getting around that? Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that. I'm sorry, Barbara, go ahead.
And my second question, so that you can, you can be fluent, is about daycare expenses, how we can help young families deal with that issue.
I'm sorry, with what?
Daycare.
Okay, daycare. Okay, sure.
Yes.
Okay.
That includes debt.
Got it. All right. Well, you're touching on two very important issues. And in fact, just talking to people in the Biden administration today about both of those issues. When I ran for president, my view was that we should cancel all student debt in America. The overwhelming majority of the people who are carrying that debt are working people, lower income people. You know, I've talked to so many people who, you know, we talked about the high cost of housing. A woman earlier on talked about a daughter spending 50% of her income in housing. You got people spending an enormous amount of money paying off their student debt. And stop and think about it for a moment. People are paying off this debt. For what did they do? Did they go to Las Vegas and lose the money at a gambling hall? They wanted an education. We want them to get an education. We need a well-educated workforce if this country is going to do well in a competitive global economy. And we're punishing people for the crime of getting an education. That does not make sense to me. Now, Biden didn't go as far as I wanted him to go, but he went fairly far. But then we have this right-wing Supreme Court that ruled against him. And he tried to figure out a way to come back. And in fact, he has forgiven many, many billions of dollars in student debt. But I think that as we go into this campaign, it is important for us to figure out a way to get around the Supreme Court in one way or another. Too many people, young people, are hurting, and that's an issue that we have to address. Daycare, I would get back to a point I made a little while ago in our efforts to pass what we called Build Back Better. Massive amounts of money going into child care. During the American Rescue Plan, which was passed in March of 21, we put a whole lot of money into child care throughout the country. 3 years later, that money expired. It was a 3-year program, unfortunately. But we have a major child care crisis. The cost of child care is very, very high for working families. Workers are not getting paid what they should be for the important work they're doing. There aren't enough slots available for parents. We've got a real crisis there. And if we as a nation get our priorities right and, in fact, are concerned about little kids and working families, we are going to invest in child care. I'm working very hard on that as well.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for that question. Senator, I'm going to combine a couple questions here for you. I know this is something that you care very deeply about. There's a number of people who have questions about first responders, how we make sure that we have the people we need to drive our ambulances and respond to fires. And connected to that, we also have some questions with concerns about fentanyl and other highly addictive drugs that we're seeing in Vermont. So I thought I'd give you the chance to hopefully speak to some questions that Leslie and Edward and a few other folks have on that important issue in Vermont right now.
Well, those are, in fact, very important questions. And something just occurred to me when I was responding to Barbara and child care and student debt. And I think there are probably some people out there saying, well, that's great. You know, we want to forgive student debt. We want to put money into child care. Where's the money going to come from? Where's the money going to come from? Which is a fair question. And the point that I should have made is that we cannot forget that we are the richest country in the history of the world. And yet we have massive levels of income and wealth inequality where the people on top have never, ever had it so good. Corporate profits are soaring. Yet we have a tax system which allows large corporations in many respects to avoid paying any taxes at all because they have good accountants and they have a tax system that they help create, where the very rich, in some cases, pay an effective tax rate lower than, you know, nurses or truck drivers. So we need, if we're going to talk about addressing our priorities, whether it is child care or student debt or housing, we have the money, but we're going to have a tax system which demands that the wealthiest people and the largest corporations start paying their fair share of taxes. In terms of the last question you've asked, Katie, this fentanyl, let me start off with fentanyl. It is a disaster. You know, I was just talking to a fire chief in one of our major towns, and we're seeing fentanyl all over the place. It is in pills. Obviously, people don't know what they're ingesting. We are seeing 100,000 people a year die of overdoses. We're seeing a level of overdoses in Vermont that I never would have imagined could have happened, and fentanyl is a lot of that reason. So we are working on the issue of fentanyl from its source, how it comes into this country, people who are pushing this stuff, and you got some very powerful, well-organized cartels, big businesses, multi-billion-dollar businesses, who are pushing these drugs. So it ain't easy, but it is an issue that has to be addressed. The amount of addiction that we're seeing in Vermont now and around the country is really very frightening. First responders, let me thank all of the people who may be listening who are first responders. for their, for what they're doing. They're saving lives every single day, and we are doing our best to support first responders. We're doing our best. We brought in some money in the state to help train people to become EMT people, get the training they need at a cost that they can't afford. Right now, that training is often much too expensive. But how we support our local fire departments, volunteer fire departments, how we is something that we are working on, and they play just an enormously important role in our community, small towns, especially all over the state. So with that, Katie, I think we are going to wrap up. And let me just thank all of the people who asked questions, and I know there were, 10 times more than got a chance to offer a question. And just to conclude by saying once again, if there are any issues you think we can help you with, and we really do have a very good staff. I'm not just touting our horn here. These guys do a great job trying to break through the bureaucracy and help Vermonters get the support that they need. And that number is 1-800-339-9834. We send out a Bernie Buzz. I hope some of you get. We do that 2 or 3 times a week, and sometimes we have a lot of information about programs that are out there and what's available. Let me just conclude the way I started. These are tough times. I wish I could tell you differently. A lot of people are under stress. Just in my own office in the last couple of weeks, I've got 2 people who came down with COVID. Another guy who was really sick, a lot of sickness going around. A lot of economic anxiety. They're worried about climate. They're worried about Gaza. They're worried about Ukraine. Worried about housing. That's all real now. That's real stuff. But I think if we pull together as a nation, if we do not allow demagogues to divide us up, by our sexual orientation or the color of our skin or where we were born, if we focus on the needs of ordinary Americans, I think we'll get out of this. Just the other night, I spoke to the United Automobile Workers at their convention here in D.C., which is where I am right now. You had, I think, 800 people there. These are working people who are working hard every day, but they understand that we have to fight to protect American democracy and fight for an economy that works for all of our people, not just a few. So let's keep going forward. I'm proud of what Vermont is doing, what everybody is doing. Got a lot of work in front of us, but let's keep going forward. So thank you all very much for listening. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Senator Sanders, and thank you to everyone who joined tonight's call. As a final reminder, if you or your family needs any help with a federal agency, you can call our office at 800-339-9834, or you can go to our website at sanders.senate.gov, where you can sign up for the Bernie Buzz. Have a good night, everyone.